There are some supplements which are fantastic. They have a solid evidence base behind them and are backed by science. Whether it's for weight loss, sporting performance gains, or supporting the average person in daily life, they have clear benefits and are definitely worth considering. Then there's the other side of supplements. Some don't have any good research to support them and are really just a waste of your money. Today, we're going to talk about creatine, and by the end of this episode, you'll know which side of the fence creatine sits on and whether it's something you should use. And don't worry if you don't really know what creatine is. I'll run through this with you and give you one pretty amazing bit of information early on, which I think will surprise you. Hey, and welcome to Vegetarian Health and Longevity, a podcast by Hurry the Food Up, where I cover topics that help vegetarians live longer in better health. I'm your host, James LeBague, and I work as a registered sport and exercise nutritionist and advanced clinical practitioner in family medicine. It's my pleasure to interview expert guests, share my own experiences from working with patients and clients, and demystify some of the nutrition fluff that's out there to give you practical, take-home information that you can use to live a healthier life. In my role as a registered sports nutritionist and advanced clinical practitioner in family medicine, supplements are something which I end up discussing a lot. Whether that's immune-boosting supplements, ones to help you smash out a few more running intervals, or perhaps one that could induce weight loss, I get a heck of a lot of questions about them. Creatine is a super common one, and a lot of people are curious about it, in part because it seems to be so widely used. You'll see people on Instagram posting about it, online ads telling you to use it, and heaps of YouTube videos aimed at pretty much any demographic out there. So we need to talk about it properly here and dive into whether it truly has benefits and whether it's something that you should use. Now, I mentioned at the start of this podcast about an amazing bit of information that might surprise you, and I'm not going to make you wait around after promising it. Lots of people worry about taking creatine because of putting a manufactured supplement into their body and that it could be harmful. And this is something that I am totally on board with. It's your body. You've only got one. And you've got to be careful. But the incredible thing about creatine that not many people know is that you already have creatine in your body. You actually have lots of it. Your body uses and regenerates it every day, and you wouldn't really be able to live without it. So supplementing with creatine is very much as the name suggests. You are topping up your body's natural stores of creatine with the hope of receiving benefits from it. Now let's have a little fun science dive into creatine and what it actually does. But don't worry, it's not going to be too detailed and I'll make this relatable for you. Creatine is a compound that is naturally produced and it is involved in energy production in your body. The most critical energy system that it's involved in is called the phosphocreatine system. And this is the system that produces rapid energy in short bursts, for example, when you jump in the air or run across the road. This system is the dominant energy system for this sort of high-intensity movement, and this is where most of the focus for creatine as a supplement is. The rationale is that by having more creatine available, you have better capacity for these sorts of movements, and most discussion on the benefits of creatine revolve around doing weight training or high-intensity interval training, where you can essentially squeeze out a little more work than you might have been able to without creatine. So think a couple more seconds of high intensity running or another rep or two within a weight set. Now, depending on your goals, this might not sound that appealing to you, but there is actually more potential benefit to creatine, and we're going to dig into this more later. But let's talk about the high intensity benefits of creatine more. Is it worth it, and does it actually have any evidence to show that it can help you? In terms of evidence, absolutely. Creatine is one of the most researched supplements, and has shown clear benefits in improving time to fatigue in these small high-intensity bouts. This probably does only mean that you can eke out a few seconds or reps, but it is clearly beneficial. But the follow-on question for me is, does this really matter? Sure, you might be able to do a little bit more, but what is the end result? A meta-analysis, which is an overview of all studies investigating a certain area, looked at the effect of creatine supplementation and resistance training, and found that those who supplemented with creatine had a small but significant increase in their skeletal muscle in both their upper and lower body. In short, they had more muscle. As you might know from previous episodes, I'm all about more muscle for pretty much anyone. And this doesn't mean big, bulky muscle. This just means functional muscle that helps you carry out your everyday activities, play with your kids or grandkids, walk up the stairs. And if creatine helps you to grow and maintain that muscle, then that's an absolute win. But there's a big caveat here for me. And that's in order for it to have the most benefit, you need to make sure you do resistance training, or strength training as some people know it. This means you do need to do it regularly, and we're talking a minimum of 2 times a week to get the most benefits from it. Which means that creatine might not be worth it for someone who isn't regularly doing resistance training because you're not going to get all the muscular benefits from it. And actually, rather than going straight for a supplement, I would just prefer someone manages to do regular resistance training because that overall will have far more benefit. However, there is actually some suggestion that independent of resistance training, there has been improvement in muscle mass and strength in elderly populations when they have supplemented creatine, which is really quite amazing and suggests that it's beneficial whether or not they are exercising. If that then reduces the amount of muscle they lose as they age, and for example reduces the risk of someone falling, then I am all for it. But I definitely would still encourage resistance training because it has so many other benefits. And if you want to know more about this, then you can listen to episode 3, How Resistance Training Can Help You Live for Longer in Better Health. Now, this is actually quite a nice segue into the next section. You would be forgiven for thinking I'd planned this, because there is more to creatine than just muscle. Creatine's involvement in mood and its relation to depression is currently being investigated extensively in multiple studies. There's mounting evidence to suggest that creatine is involved with brain pathways that affect mood, and it may have the potential to reduce the features of clinical depression. There's a lot more research needed here, but certainly the early evidence points to it being a potential therapeutic agent, which is really exciting and absolutely a big plus for creatine if this were the case. While I'm not sure in isolation there's enough for me currently to say that it's worth it for people who struggle with their mood, it seems to me like it's a possibility and shouldn't be ignored. As well as that, creatine also seems to have some link to cognitive function, essentially how well your brain is working. In a review of the randomized controlled trials that investigated this, the summary was that there is evidence to suggest that it can improve short-term memory as well as intelligence and reasoning, with stronger benefits for the elderly as well as people who are experiencing high stress. The rationale behind all this is again to do with increasing the amount of creatine that is available in your body, and in relation to cognition and mood, it's the amount of creatine in your brain. It seems that supplementing creatine can help with all of these various aspects, and honestly, I find this really quite incredible. Just a quick hi to say that if you're interested in using the vegetarian diet to lose weight, then you should check out our free vegetarian weight loss meal plan at hurrythefoodup.com/try. That's TRY. We've created a meal plan that has all the recipes, ingredients, and instructions easily laid out for you, complete with a shopping list. It's super easy to follow and has loads of tasty recipes in, so head to hurrythefoodup.com/try to get started today. Alright, back to the episode. Now, I'm going to specifically talk about creatine supplementation in terms of how much it costs, what type of creatine to buy, whether you need to take it in bursts, and also whether there are any downsides to creatine. But first, let's go through whether vegetarians should be supplementing creatine. So creatine is naturally produced in your body, and you have this store of it already, but it can also be consumed through your diet. However, for vegetarians, this is very unlikely because the main source of dietary creatine is in animal protein such as meat and fish. There may be a small amount of creatine in milk, but otherwise vegetarians will have a very limited exposure to creatine in their diet, if any. And because there is evidence that even in meat eaters, creatine supplementation is beneficial, vegetarians will definitely stand to benefit from creatine supplementation, which will increase that creatine store in their body. So let's say you decide you'd like to take creatine. What should you take and how frequently? I love this as a topic because there is so much rubbish out there on the internet about this. There are different forms of creatine available with a huge variation of price, with claims around the different forms being more effective than the other. Now, I can make this super simple for you by saying that you should choose creatine monohydrate and nothing else. Studies show that 99% of creatine monohydrate is absorbed into muscle or naturally excreted through urine, and consistently show better results in studies compared to other forms of creatine. The only issue is that creatine monohydrate is not as soluble as other forms, which mean it can lead to a grainy texture if mixed with liquid. So the good news is that you don't have to worry about any of the marketing claims. Just choose creatine monohydrate. When it comes to taking creatine, you might have heard of something called a loading dose. And this is where you consume more creatine for something like 5 to 7 days, with the aim to increase your stores quickly and then settle into the daily dose. However, we now know that this isn't required, and the advice is to consume 5 grams of creatine per day without any need for a loading dose. You can mix it in drinks, smoothies, or have it in something like overnight oats, which is actually what I do, as yep, I take creatine every day. One of the common questions I get about creatine is whether you need to cycle it. If that doesn't mean anything to you, then don't worry. Cycling creatine means taking it periodically, where, for example, you take it for a couple of months and then have a break. There's no evidence to suggest that this is necessary, and you can just take it continuously. One of the worries that people have about creatine is that it can cause weight gain. When you start consuming additional creatine, your body stores a little bit more water within your muscles, and this is why you see that increase. Typically, it's about a 1 to 2 kilo increase in weight. It's really important for me to highlight that this is just water weight, so there's no increase in fats here. Most people don't even notice this, and in my opinion, it shouldn't be a reason to put you off creatine. Also, this probably isn't a long-term thing either, so while you get a short-term increase, this is likely to tail off again over the long term, so it's even less of an issue. Another concern that people have is that creatine can cause kidney problems. Again, this is one of those things which is a historic worry, and we have a heck of a lot of evidence now to show that this isn't the case. In healthy individuals, there's no reason to worry about creatine harming your kidneys, because all of the evidence suggests there's just no issue here. If you have a diagnosis like chronic kidney disease, where your kidney function is impaired, then this could be more of an issue, and I'd suggest speaking with your family doctor if that's the case. Finally, there's an issue of cost. While prices will vary, I buy creatine monohydrate without any sort of discount or affiliation for £25 for 400 grams of creatine. That's 25 British sterling pounds or around $32 US. Given the daily dose of creatine is 5 grams, that means that it costs about 31 pence or 40 cents per serving. Obviously, this might be different depending where you are in the world, but I'll leave it to you to decide whether that's expensive or not for the potential benefits that it could give you. So really, creatine is quite an amazing supplement. We already have it in our body, but supplementing, regardless of diet, has been shown to improve creatine levels, which could then benefit exercise performance, muscle strength and size, cognition and mood, and especially so in elderly populations. While I can't give you an individual recommendation, as far as supplements go, creatine is probably my number one for genuine benefits, and I would find it difficult to say much negative about it. So I hope you found this episode interesting and it gave you some helpful info about creatine. If you did find it useful, then please give the podcast a quick review on whatever platform you're listening on. It helps the podcast to spread to more like-minded people like you, and it'll only take a moment. Super grateful. I'll see you next time.